€755,144.86. Doesn't sound like very much, does it? That's the amount of money, according to all available data and a few educated assumptions, that it would cost to vote the required number of times in the right places to score more than 400 points from the public in Eurovision. Don't worry, I will explain how we get to that number, which might seem like an alarmingly small amount. Luckily, I do have good news about why rigging the entire contest in this way is implausible, but also bad news about the fact that in a lot of countries, this isn't that difficult to do, to an extent that it could critically undermine the integrity of the voting at the contest. In addition to that, there are a series of other threats that have to be dealt with, and unless changes are made, we might not see a legitimate result in the contest in 2026. Firstly, though, I have an alternative suggestion on how to spend €755,144.86, and that's using it to buy 446,292 months of Surfshark VPN with the code ESCGABE. That'll ensure your access until the year 39,216. Without this special offer, it would run out in 33,902. So I'm cutting you a good deal here. Seriously though, I'm expecting to be traveling a lot during Eurovision season, and it's good to know that wherever I am, I'm going to be able to watch the same shows on Netflix that I'm watching back home, as well as accessing series that are available elsewhere but not in the UK. When it comes to streaming, Surfshark has more than 3,200 servers in more than 100 countries, and they're high speed so you will never have to deal with buffering either. If you're in the US, for example, you can use Surfshark to watch Eurovision on YouTube when it's blocked, usually in the country. Surfshark also has the added benefit of letting you use the internet without having to hand over your ID and personal details to random private companies you've never heard of, and it protects your activity online from their prying eyes as well as everyone else's. With data companies and corporations gathering as much information about us as they possibly can, Surfshark gives you peace of mind by blocking ads and blocking trackers, as well as keeping all of your web activity anonymous. I can't recommend Surfshark enough, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk to you if you want to give it a try. Go to surfshark.com/ESCGABE or use code ESCGABE at checkout to get 4 months extra of Surfshark. Now, there's a reason why we're talking about voting at Eurovision now. You may have noticed that over the last couple of years, it has become one of the biggest issues in the contest. If you've been watching, you may have noticed something like this happen twice in a row now.
323 points! 297 points!
In 2022 to 2024, the winner of the public vote was the second, and fourth most streamed song in those respective years. So it was met with more than a little skepticism when this year's televote winner was the 17th most streamed. How could a song with zero interest prior to the contest suddenly deliver a result that good and then immediately disappear once again into thin air? The organisers of the competition insist that the voting was fair and that there was no foul play. But there have been curious outcomes in the public vote for years. And at the moment, the system is far too easy to exploit, both directly and indirectly. Let's start by explaining how direct vote manipulation works and how I got that number in the title. In every country across Europe, you can vote in one of 3 ways, depending on the country. You can send a text message, you can call a number, or you can vote online. This costs a varied amount from country to country as well. At the cheap end, it costs the equivalent of just 13 cents in Denmark, while in Finland, it's the other extreme at €1.50. Points are then attributed based on how many votes each song got. So the song that received the most votes in a country would get 12 points, the second most votes gets 10 points, and so on. To work out how much it would cost to get 12 points from any given country in terms of the voting cost, we need to know 2 things. Firstly, how many voters there are in a country, and secondly, what proportion of that vote is needed to likely secure 12 points. Let's start with how many voters there are in total in each country. In the past, we would be totally in the dark about this, but this year, thanks to Spain and Belgium, we actually have some concrete figures. They released both their total viewership and their voting amount this year. Estimating for everyone else is quite complicated, but thankfully, Ben from escinsight has actually already written an article where he does exactly this. We're going to be using his estimates today. If you want more information on this, he does go into all the different factors that he used to calculate these estimates in his article, including the cost of voting in each country, the disposable income that residents in each country have, the level of engagement that each country has with the contest, and of course the total number of viewers overall. His model produced numbers for Belgium and Spain that were very, very similar to the actual real life figures, which suggests that this has some validity. He does want to point out the limitations of this data though, particularly at the very low and high viewership end of the spectrum, but we're gonna try and account for this later. Secondly, we need to consider what proportion of the vote in each country is required to get 12 points. Conveniently, we actually have some information that helps us with this too. According to Italian law, the Italian broadcaster is obliged to reveal exact proportional results for all shows that involve voting. Some of you may recall when they infamously did this by accident after one of the semi-finals in 2024. What this information shows us is that broadly speaking, you need 25% of the vote to be very short of 12 points. With that, we can do some quick maths. 25% of the estimated total number of votes in each country, multiplied by the cost of voting in each country. Then you get a table which tells you how much it would cost in total in each place. There are a couple of places missing here. Firstly, the rest of the world, where we have absolutely no data. Secondly, San Marino does not have a public vote. However, we can still include the points given in our estimate because the most likely explanation is that they are aggregated based on similar voting countries on the jury side. That would be countries like Italy and Albania. Because of this, in this extreme scenario, it's safe to assume that San Marino is sending their 12 points to the same place that everyone else is. Secondly, when it gets to that number of how much it would cost, there are 5 countries we're not considering. Those are France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the UK. The reason for this is we set out our target at the start as 400 points in the televote. These 5 countries alone would cost the same amount as all the rest combined. We can get rid of them and still have 396 points. So we're still on target and we're much more cost effective. All of that in mind, that's where we get this figure. For the low price of €755,144.86, you can pay for enough votes at Eurovision to absolutely guarantee you will win the public vote by a considerable distance. For most private individuals, record labels, or musicians, this figure is not realistic. But for a state-sponsored actor or an extremely committed grassroots campaign, consisting of a decent number of individuals extremely committed to influencing the contest's outcome, all of a sudden the barriers towards pulling in hundreds of unearned points comes down pretty fast. You might be thinking right now that I'm outlining a pretty ridiculous worst case scenario. And to an extent, yes, it is vanishingly unlikely that something this egregious would be attempted or not be caught by the existing anti-rigging systems. And in any case, even if it didn't get caught by those systems, everyone would look at the results and immediately smell a rat. But this scenario is not the one that I'm warning against in this video. It's rather to illustrate the fact that a smaller scale manipulation that is still significant is very possible under the current voting system. It could be done almost without detection, and it wouldn't be that difficult for those with the financial ability to pay. In fact, it's literally been attempted already at least once. That's enabled by the fact that in a lot of countries, you just don't need that much manpower to do this under the current system. Let's look at that example, which was in 2013. Lithuanian journalists from the website 15min caught Azerbaijan's vote buying operation in the act. And the secret recording of the meeting they had with the people doing it helpfully tells us how they did it. The conditions are as follows. We gather groups of 10 people each. We'll now be going to your university and then to a street. In a word, if we do it in one place, we will simply overload phone networks and our voting will be blocked. The technology requires multiple groups of 10 people. The groups must be at least 1 kilometer apart. Each of the 10 persons in the group must have 5 phones, any phones. 1 phone with their own SIM card will pay just to top up the account, and the other 4 provided by us. At 10 p.m, the entire group must sit in one place where there is a TV set. Last time, one group was staying in the Panorama Mall in Vilnius, where the meeting with the vote buyers took place, and they were asked to leave at 11 p.m, so this place is not very suitable. You can do it at home. One of our men will stay with the group to supervise since we are paying money for this. The voting starts sometime between 11:30 and 12. One group will be staying in our motel, another one in student halls, one more in a cafe. Think about a place that would suit you. How many groups have we got? 8 to 10. You are one of our groups. Think of a place. It's not difficult to do the maths here. 10 people, 10 groups, 5 phones each equals 500 phones in total, and you can vote up to 20 times. That's an impact, if you carried out the exact same plan now, of 10,000 votes. According to our previous calculation, 13,750 is the number of votes required to be almost sure of 12 points from Lithuania. All of that impact from a group of just 100 people. The actual voting part, that would set you back just over €12,000. €1,000 per point. Coincidentally, the year after this reporting was done and an investigation was privately carried out by the EBU, Azerbaijan's results suddenly fell off a cliff, and they have never reached those previous heights since. Funny that. To give a more modern example, in 2025, escinsight sat down two people with just one phone each and a total of 8 bank cards that they personally owned. Between them, they were able to vote 160 times in 5 minutes. That's 2 people without any change of device, IP address, location, or email address during the process, and without using a VPN either. The point of all of this is to say, given that the financial barrier to voting so many times is so low, there is no use in making voting itself more expensive. That's not going to fix the problem. If you have enough motivation to spend €750,000 to win Eurovision, you've probably got enough motivation to spend double or triple that. However, there are a number of practical barriers that we can put up to stop people gaming the system and eliminate almost all of the cost-effective methods of doing this at scale. Let's go through them and explain how implementing each of them makes it exponentially more difficult for any kind of organized campaign to farm a huge amount of votes from a relatively small number of people. First is to impose regulations on the advertising of entries at the contest, as well as the language used in those adverts. In the last 2 years, the Israeli government has spent millions on advertising, specifically targeted towards people who may not necessarily be Eurovision fans or viewers, but who are more likely, according to their advertising profiles, to be supportive of Israel in some way politically. These ads featured the Israeli artist speaking in the local language of the country in question, encouraging people to vote, with the text on screen stressing that you could vote up to 20 times. Estimates put the number of times these ads were viewed at approximately 80 million. Representing a 7-figure euros sum of money spent. My hot and cynical take is that these adverts were not made for Eurovision fans, and there's a reason why the Israeli government was willing to spend so much money on them. The purpose of these adverts was to ensure that those who support Israel politically, regardless of their affinity to the contest, or if they were even planning to watch it in the first place, picked up their phones and voted as many times as possible for Israel. It was clearly effective last year, and this year they repeated the trick. They got an almost identical set of 12s in terms of country spread, both this year and last year as a result. This is statistically almost impossible. The degree to which this worked very nearly tipped the scales far enough to send us to Tel Aviv in 2026. It's one thing for a record label or artist or delegation to spend some of their limited budget on advertising their entry. This has been part of the contest for years, and while a little questionable, it doesn't have a big impact on the results. That's purely because of the different scale of financial resources available. But for a government to directly interfere in the contest this way, as they did because the Israeli Foreign Ministry was the one paying for these adverts, is blatantly unfair, especially when the budget is this large. There should be a total ban on this kind of activity. Advertising should only be allowed if it's paid for privately by the record label or the artist in question. In addition, the language of the adverts should be regulated to prevent adverts that encourage people to just game the system. Next are some direct practical actions that we can take immediately to fix a lot of the problems and actually massively reduce the impact of things like those adverts. First is to completely eliminate all telephone and SMS-based voting and move all online-based voting into the Eurovision app. In past years, this might not have been possible, but now that the percentage of people with access to an internet connection and a smartphone is so high, there's really no issue with moving the entire voting process online. Many national finals have already done this. This instantly solves the first and most traditional method of vote stuffing, buying a whole bunch of cheap shitty phones and cheap shitty SIM cards in order to vote a whole bunch of times before throwing them all out once you're done. In my previous job as a political organizer here in the UK, I actually have set up phone banks for candidates, which entailed going and buying a bunch of brick phones and buying a bunch of SIM cards, charging them up with a minimum amount of credit, and then giving them to volunteers to call up people who are trying to engage in whatever that specific campaign is. This takes an alarmingly small amount of time, and that was just me doing it by myself. Imagine an entire team of organised people doing this for a living. This kind of vote rigging has become less common in recent years, but it does still do something important by eliminating those channels. That is consolidating all of the voting into a single centralised platform that can be easily controlled by the organisers. Rather than relying on a pan-European patchwork of European television telephone providers, resulting in 3 separate ways to vote with the availability of all 3 wildly varying from country to country, you have one system, and therefore only one set of vulnerabilities to deal with rather than 3. Moving it into the app rather than having it online in a browser also enables some of the other solutions that I'm going to suggest. One of those would be changing the maximum number of votes per country. Note that I'm not saying we should change the total number of votes that people can give. That's currently 20, and I also don't think that we should go to a junior Eurovision style system where you have to vote for 3 countries. That being said, I don't think there is any good reason why anyone should be able to vote for any one country more than 3 times. The motivations for having a total of 20 votes available is understandable from a few different perspectives, because if someone really likes a song, they can vote for it multiple times, as well as being able to vote for multiple songs in the show. As well as that, it does serve as an income source for the contest, albeit not on the same level as tickets or sponsorship. The flip side of this that we have to fix is that it allows masses of votes to be cast for one country in an instant. This solution keeps the good parts of this system but removes the bad. The principle is this. If you can vote 20 times in total, but only up to 3 times for any one song, you can still retain the exact same ability to spread your votes across your favourite songs and express a preference towards one by giving it 3 votes instead of 1 or 2. But you also increase the practical difficulty of manipulating this process by 6.7 times. For every credit card or mobile device you needed before to vote multiple times, you now need 6.7 times as many to do the same thing. That instantly delivers a massive improvement to the integrity of the voting system without massively impacting any other element of the contest. Another aspect that needs to be dealt with is one that was discussed in the escinsight article I mentioned before. They were able to vote hundreds of times in an instant simply using different credit cards on the same device. Luckily, this is fixable. When you vote, the Eurovision app has access to a few bits of information that could identify you as a unique voter. First is the credit card or debit card that you use to vote, which hopefully doesn't require much of an explanation. Second is your phone's unique device ID, which apps can request access to both on iOS and on Android. You could in theory also check IP addresses, but this would just cause people in the same household to only be able to vote once in total because they'd all have the same public IP address. You can very easily make it very difficult to vote multiple times by having a 2-layered verification process. First, you must vote with a card that has not been used already, and secondly, it must be on a device that has not been used already. No amount of factory resetting your phone, wiping it clean, or deleting the Eurovision app and reinstalling it will ever change the card number of the card you use or the device ID of your phone. This would mean that any mass voting operation conducted by a small number of individuals would require a logistically impossible number of devices and bank cards and would ultimately slam the door on any such operation being possible. There are edge cases where multiple people might need to vote from the same device or using the same card, such as parents with young children who don't have a device to do so themselves. In these cases, I would say, you have 20 votes anyway, even if everything in this video is implemented. Just do 1 vote with input from you and your child together. I'm really dubious about whether this would affect a large number of people, and I don't think it's something we need to be concerned about. Finally, I want to briefly mention the timing of when people are allowed to vote. This is currently a short window after all of the songs have performed in the semi-finals and the whole show during the final. There's been some discussion about whether this should be changed, but honestly, looking into it, I'm starting to think it's a bit of a distraction. The results this year show us that the same suspicious voting patterns are present no matter which of these 2 systems you're using. The reality is, with the show as it is now, you can do the things you need to do to put your thumbs on the scale, whether you have 15 minutes or the whole show to do it. For that reason, implementing all the other changes that I've suggested in this video would make that completely unnecessary. This video started from a slightly silly thought experiment and has gone into a very serious look into what is genuinely one of the most important and defining challenges to the Eurovision Song Contest right now. I did really clearly want to point to one thing, and I'm going to say it again as I said it before. The amount of money that it takes to pay for a lot of votes in the contest is essentially trivial if you're a bad actor with sufficient resources. But those same bad actors can be thwarted with the right practical steps being taken. Hopefully those things will happen, and we can have faith that we're operating in some kind of fair and difficult to exploit environment. Right now, I don't feel that way. But given there is an active discussion within the EBU on this issue, I'm really hopeful that broadcasters and the EBU will take some action on this. In fairness to them, we did already see indications in their statements after the contest that it would be something that was looked into. Next week, we're going to have the second part of last week's Almost in Eurovision video, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. As well, if you enjoyed this video, you might want to like and you might want to subscribe subscribe just to make sure you catch all of the Eurovision 2026 coverage that will hopefully be coming in the new year. As well as that, details on how to support me financially are in the description if you want to do so. You'll get thanked at the end of the videos, and you get to see videos a day early if you do that. I'd be hugely grateful personally because I'm trying to save up €755,144 and 86 cents in order to rig the contest in favour of Loco Boombox.
To the right, dos, tres, cuatro, salta, cha, cha, cha.
For now, thanks for watching, take care, and I will see you again very soon.